It's funny, every time I turn the camera on to do a video, I think I've just stopped listening to some great old 60s music on the sort of random Google music selection, and I've been singing along to it and feeling all musical, and then I switched that off because, of course, in this YouTube day and age, you can't have that on, or else you end up either getting your chances are you get your video switched off in a particular terrain locality, or at best you get your monetization shut down and shared or shut off completely, and so we kind of end up in a world where we don't have the normal things, and it's like, this isn't normal. I'm suddenly no longer singing along to music, and so everything in YouTube becomes devoid of the one thing. It's like, those do you remember when you used to watch soap operas and what's out there? Somebody got a drone? No, they've got Starlink though. Yeah, we used to watch a soap opera, and there was all kinds of important stuff going on in the world in real life, and you'd wonder why the soap opera never mentioned what was in the actual news. Do you remember that? It was weird. So this is a bit like that. Anyway, today and tomorrow we've got two guitars from Mike. Mike came down last week and brought these down, hand delivered them from Southampton, and this one is more straightforward, touch ash wood, and it's the Squire, made in Indonesia, Squire Telecaster, Thinline Telecaster by Squire, and as you see, it's a either swamp ash or ash, two-piece body. That looks a bit. Actually, you know what? Could even get away with being one piece. He says, looking down. Oh, no, it's two-piece. Clever. So the split is in there. See it? The join. Anyway, it's got its familiar neck pocket cracks down there, but it's a lovely guitar. All that beautiful blonde colour, reduced weight in the body, of course, because of the thin line, and it has some acoustic resonance too. So if you're in the mood to kind of play acoustically, it is listenable, or you can hear it. Anyway, so this is I've lowered the action already on this, so but I'm going to do a setup with it on this action. This is the simpler of the two, as I said, touch wood, and this is loose, so we may have to fill and redo that strap button. It's got some weird things around it. You can't see that. It's got some weird things around it. What's that? I don't know. Anyway, so yes, it should be the more straightforward of the two. This is going to get set up. I'm going to just do the frets just so they're happy with that lower action that I've put on it. And we're also going to remove and replace the Corian nut with one of those, and we're going to replace the string tree with one of those. So it should be all delightfully straightforward, with nothing kind of unusual to report. And I have not been able to say that for a long time, because it seems like every time I even say such a thing, it all goes bizarrely wrong. And let's see if I can get an angle on what I'm trying to do here, because it's always hopeless to get a good angle. Sorry, camera angles and stuff. So first thing I'm going to do on this is I'm going to start with the nut. So the idea is I'm going to remove the nut, replace and finesse and tweak the replacement into place. Now this one has been painted over with finish, so we're going to gently score, and we're going to score the finish to be able to remove the nut without any damage to the finish. Obviously it will take away that nice little covered up bit, but it's always a bit ragged anyway, because when you look closely at the nut is sort of half, the finish that goes onto the nut almost always breaks off, so it ends up being kind of part on, part off. So we'll take that off. There's a missing bit anyway here, so there's a little bit of damage to the finish just there. So how can you see? Yeah, you can see. What I can't do is turn around, so I'm going to kind of do a sort of careful bit of left-handed work. It's got some grime already caught in it. So what was I listening to before? Oh, I was listening to, I think it had gone to Pretty Woman by that thingy bloke, Roy Orbison. So one of the things I've had some trouble with recently has been the Fender way of applying finish to the maple fingerboards, which leaves a horrible situation. I'll just out of interest, I'll mention it here for those who haven't seen it before. But Fender USA in Mexico, they tend to put on their frets on the board, and then they tend to spray finish over the top of them, and the finish goes on very thick, and it sort of lays up and over the frets, kind of a bit like this. I'm probably exaggerating, but you can see it's like a carpet. And then what they do is they go along with their file or something just before it leaves the factory, and they probably just scrape off the top of it, could even be with a knife, and then they buff the tops of those frets sticking through. And that actually is okay, but usually what you get is when you have a neck like that, you can always see the light reflecting from these little bumps. It's not even, so you get these little kind of crinkled sparkles, which it tells you that it's been done in that fashion, and that's not great, because you get, if it's something like got amber, and a lot of these necks have quite a lot of amber in the tinted amber finish. You'll get this amber colour all the way up the sides like this. I mean, it's on the deck too, but it looks, you really see it up against the side of the fret, and then it kind of it cracks off where they've done this polishing, so it kind of forms this messy, ragged line along the frets. That's pretty bad and looks messy, and I have to kind of try and polish it out with my fret polishing method. But the worst part of this fretting technique that they do, and it's obvious because it's fairly cost effective for them, but the worst thing is if you try and pull out a fret to refret, you pull out the fret and it breaks a bit more of that material. There you go, there's my version. Breaks a bit more of the material out as you pull it out, and actually these edges here, these kind of lifted edges, very easily start flaking off. And then when you press the new frets in, you get new frets in there, and even if you try your hardest, they never fit absolutely perfectly. And what they do is when they go in place, they either sit on those crispy edges or they push them down and kind of cause more crinkling. It's just, suffice to say, it's an absolute pain in the butt. And I'd always noticed this over the years, and I've been always taking it into account and working extra hard to try and sand back those areas and protect them and try and overcome the damage that this method had done. Or let me show you then the whole point of this. So the point is that Indonesia and Far East don't do that. And if you look at the reflected light off there, apart from there's a bit of finger grime there, let's ignore that. You go up here, can you see how there's none of that carpet of finish going up the frets? You can tell by the light. The light is continuous right the way up. It's one flat surface, and that's a trademark sign or a telltale sign that this has been sprayed first, buffed to whatever gloss level they want, and then the frets have been added on top of that, and that makes refretting, it makes doing everything thereafter so much easier. So good old Indonesia, I'm happy to see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my strings slacked off. So I'm going to use these here strings as sacrificial strings, in the meantime, I want to take the nut out now. So, oh, that's sticky in there. So these were not staying in tune very well at all, so it would be a good idea to replace. So I'm just going to slacken off a bit, move things out of the way. Let's put them like I intended onto my special retaining clips. There we go, keeps them out of the way. So there's grime coming off the strings as well. Actually, I can't do that for a minute. So the aim now is to see whether I can persuade this nut to come out, or whether it's going to put up a struggle. And hopefully it will not struggle. So we get our little hammer and we'll tip it onto its side and hold it with the armpit. And the idea now will be to, what you can do various things. You could, if you're feeling like it, and maybe we'll do this just as a little example. If you're not sure, not confident, you can make get a head start on your edge of your nut here by hand turning, possibly, if I can just get it to stay in one place, hand turning a little, what's this thing called, a little hole. So I made a little hole which theoretically should give me a little bit of purchase now. So what I want to do is have this seated close so I don't get any bend, and now I can just tap that, and you can see, you probably maybe can see the gap opens up here, and I can either just gently connect with the edge of the gap, edge of the nut, and just tap it so it comes out nicely. Okay, so we've got a deep nut actually, but beautifully fitted. Well done, Squire. And yeah, we'll replace it with this one, which is sort of designed for a rounded bottom jobby, but in fact it is on a little foot. So, wow! Oh, Squire, you have made a monkey out of me. Well, who would have thought that? I thought when I saw it, it was too thick. This is actually thicker than standard regulation whatnots. So let's see if I've got something in here that's going to work better. Because failing that, I may have to do excuse me, I may have to do some kind of clever thing. So this is coming up at 350. That is way 350. That's way fatter than any such replacement nut. Who said that was going to happen? Well, that isn't good, is it? Now what am I going to do? Hey? So, did I say this was going to be straightforward? It's obviously immediately changed plans. So now I have to consider, do I try and reuse the original, which was a bit low by the time I'd lowered the action, or do I try and modify, because the replacement tusk nuts are all the same as that, which is not going to be any different. The only thing I've got is I've got a spare, pardon me, I've got a spare, or blank. I've got a couple of blanks, but they're both black, sorry, which is no good. And I have got, possibly, I may have a spare lefty that I can sacrifice. Or actually maybe a spare righty that's no good for anything. But the problem is we need the string spacing. Oh no, we'll have to, if we can use the string spacing, that would be easier. And they've done it in, okay, 35.2. So I've got this for a GS Mini, which could actually work for this. And I've got it as a probably slightly different radius, but this is annoying now. So the idea that when you think you go and buy a Tusk Strat, that it will fit any Fender, or you think Squire, there we go, straight away you have proof that it doesn't. So what I'm considering is whether I can convert this one here into one of those, which has the same string spacing. Problem is, yeah, has the same string spacing, which is good, and I've got a bit of extra thickness. So I think what I will do is I'll use that, because I've got a couple of spare ones there. I've got a right-handed. How many of those have I got? 2 more of those. I've got black. I've got a. Well, that's a spare one, but it's the wrong shape. And the string spacing. Oh, that's a good string spacing too. Am I likely to use that one? 6643. Actually, that may even be a smarter move, because why, Sam? Tell me, Sam, why? Because, dear boy, because it's no, either of them are going to have to be slightly worked with the slots, the files is what I'm looking at. Which one am I least likely to use? I'm least likely to use this Hofner one I bought, because I'm more likely to use the GS Mini one, because I get them all the time. So here we have before I open it, same spacing, just need to thin it down, that will do. So there's a job of thinning to do, which is doable. So I'm just going to sort of mark out very approximately actually the radius looks pretty similar on there. There's a slight difference, but we'll overcome that. But I'm going to mark myself a guide marking. I won't have a thing. I don't have a pencil sharp enough to do that with, so I'm going to place that there and hold that like so, and put myself a mark along there. There's my cut, which I can, if I fill it with some grime from my hand, I can see the cut quite nicely. So that's cut in that direction, and then in thickness direction we'll keep the front edge as the reference edge, and then we want 3.5 easily, but a bit more. So we'll go 3.75. Let's go, we don't mind losing half a mil, let's go 4. 3.4 from the outside, from the front edge of this. So there's my reference point again, a bit wobbly, but I can see it even if I can't mark it very accurately. Okay, so there's 2 sets of cuts, one along that way, yeah, and one along that way. So it may be better to in the real money to end up, I think so. Quite difficult to see the marks, but I'll probably end up sanding it in both cases. I'll probably do it with a thing. So actually I can bring it to here. It's going to be a bit of a noisy thing, but hold fire. Let's see, where can I bring you to there? Let's have a look. So I tend to use something that I've got control over and can have to hand before I go and where we are. Before I go and revert to the sanding thing. So with this I can take off quite a lot crudely. Actually I can probably do it over, let's do it over there first, sorry, because I can see what I'm doing. Where's the thing? There's the thing. So it'll be a bit noisy probably because I've got my microphone with me. Let's just put this on, lock it down. So I'm going to, no, that won't work. I need this one on there. So I'm going to use this big sanding drum just to take away the bulk of this thing, and then we'll fine tune a bit on the hand sanding, the Dremel-y thing, and then, you know, so this is going to be a bit noisy, so forgive me. Back edge to take off. Might be a minute. So that's a bit noisy, oops, for starters, but if I get my little cutter thing, we'll get there, cut all the sort of excess off that's obscuring the view, and I can see the width there is good, the angle there is a bit bad, so now I can get this thing going. Don't want to do that, I'm running up the edge. Okay, so that's not so far away from the height, and then we'll square that off properly with the sanding block, and then we will look at bringing this side down to correct thickness. Okay, so that's sort of the crude work done. I'm sorry, I don't know what we were looking at there. Terrible view. Let's get the sandy thing. Now this is where the measury thing will come in very handy. So let us bring this up here. Send that down there a little bit. Okay, so this now becomes a task of flattening and squaring off. So that's a bit on the leany forward side. I'm going to trust my flattening off skills, and that's looking close. Still a bit of size to go, which is fine. Let's just check it from this side and this. So eventually we'll get a nice flat bottom, and that will be the height we want to start with. That's running a bit now the wrong way, so I need to lean it forward a tiny bit now. Okay, I think I'm going to want to switch to the light weight. Square on that side, it's got a little bit of a lean back on this side, so I just need to square that up. Okay, that's better. So I oversized it anyway, so there's a little bit of leeway to firm it up. Now, this is the important bit about getting it down to thickness, and we're going to go from the back edge to get the thickness right. So first of all, we want to get ourselves a nice flat 90-degree to the bottom cut, and then at this point we're going for a 3.4, I think it is 3.45, 345, and we want 345 there. Okay, so that's nearly a whole mil too much, which is fine. It just gives us some extra room to work it down. So I'm putting pressure on the one side of it to make sure it's the right thick, or the right parallel to the front edge. So basically we'll work it down bit by bit down to the 3.5, which will take a little bit of time to do. So while we're still about 3/4 of a mil over, we can afford to be a little bit more, a little harsher with it as we get sort of broadly closer to the thing. So to get the radius correct for the 9.25, I will probably need to just very slightly work on these with the files, just to deepen the slots towards the edge, I expect. Okay, let's have a look how things are going. Back end is not too bad. Getting there slowly. 410, 397. Bit more on the treble side, even it up. $381, $381. Pretty good. Now that's on this bit, but we're running a bit thick at the top, so it's moving away from the square. So I'm going to have to lean forward on this quite a bit to square it up. See if we can be certain that we're going to square it up closer. We don't want it wedge shaped. 380, 380 still. That's good. We don't want a wedge. We don't want to have it get tighter as it goes in. So that's not looking bad, actually. Now once I've got it to the dimensions, or once I'm happy that the sides are parallel to each other, then I kind of can lighten up on the grip. 378 and 366, and we were going down to 345, remember? We don't want to touch the front edge really, that should stay as it is. So you may be able to see that we're getting there, inching our way. And this one, whereas this is a flat one, this one has a bit of a lean back to it, which will make it slightly different, but that's fine. It's a custom made nut. I think the crows are out tonight, doing a lot of crowing. Right, I'm going to lean a little bit on the forward edge here still, because it's just thickening up on the front side there a tiny bit. Looking all right. Now I think 372, 370. That's the just try something a minute. 363. Oh God, 370, 363. 363. That'll be about a millimetre over. Oh yeah, 130. So we've got a fair bit to do to bring this down. If you end up with too much height still, you can always use the files to bring it down to the correct height. But it's much better not to dig really deep with the files. You want, really, ideally, you want to start with the right height to begin with, or as close to, and then just end up with a very tiny, I mean ideally no adjustment with the nut files at all would be the best situation. But that's sometimes a bit too much to hope for. That's very close to perpendicular. Let's just look at the overall sizing. We've got in the high E slot, we've got 496 on mine, and on here we've got, on the slot, we've got 4.3, so we're about 0.6 still above, so we'll follow it down a bit. That's okay there, that's not bad there. So in a way, in both directions we need to be very careful to finesse it just right. I was going to say the width is more important. If the width is wrong, it will rattle in the slot, which is horrible. So we want to tease it down to that exact same width as this one. I mean, obviously smaller enough to get it in, but okay, 4.3 on the high E, 4.8. So we're still a bit tall. Let's just keep going. Yeah, the crows are properly busy. I saw a whole herd of them flying above when I got out of the car to come into the workshop. They're certainly busy. Maybe they're saying, the dark, depressing season is over. We have to fly somewhere else and bother some other people and depress them with our raucous chatter. Okay, what were we saying? 4.3, weren't we? 4.6. Okay, look at the right angles. We're wandering a little bit tall at the back, so I'm going to pull it towards me a small fraction. And notice that I rock from side to side. It's not because I'm unwell, it's because it's a much easier way of keeping the verticalness of the nut controlled. If you do it with your hands, you introduce a bit of a sort of twist and a rock. If you do it by moving, you keep your hands in exactly the same position, and it really does make a difference. Let's measure off the base side, the leading edge of the base side. So we need 393 to the ground, and here we've got 400. That's very, very close, and we really are very nearly there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on here, on the fine stuff, and I'm just going to sand it a little bit more with an emphasis on the front edge, just to square it that tiny bit more. Yes, that's looking good. Okay. Now I could now leave the rest to the difference to do with the nut files. So let's just measure in there 398 and here 396. Okay, that is spot on. Now the only thing I'm now concerned about is width. We've got 371 plays the original at 348, so it's 0.3 of a mil, and we're going to take it off the back and we're going to do our absolute utmost to make sure it's even cut so we don't get a wedge shape of any kind. And again, in a minute I will move to the lighter sandpaper. What are we looking for? Let's get this in my mind. 345, I should know that. Said it enough times already. 345, 356, 359. Okay, and it looks square to me. Do a little bit more. .45, remember? Okay. Okay, that's me. I'm going a bit thin on one side, not the other. So, okay, we're on 345 on one side, but not on the other. So it's a little bit of a wedge shape at the moment. So now I'm going to need to try and even this out with a little bit of fake tipping. Okay, we have got 345, 348. It's close. So at this point I'm now getting close to being able to squeeze that back in. I don't know if you can see there. It's starting to fit. So I'll zoom in on there so you can see my fitment attempts. Let's put these down here and clip them under there, vice versa. So, and let's look, where was the thing? Right, top edge here. Just trying to now square up, tiny little difference. Obviously we want to get this wants to fit in all the way across without getting stuck, or it's almost there. It's a fraction. It's nearly as good. It's now almost as perfect fitting as the actual Squire one. So this is what you get when you find out the hard way that Tusk doesn't make a replacement for Indonesian Squier Thinline. It's a different thickness, and that sends you into a whole world of coping. Okay, that's starting to feel like a nice, little bit tight at that end, but actually that's a better fit. There you go. That's a gorgeous fit. Now, I may, once I've got the slots right, I may still do a small adjustment to them. First of all, I'm going to check that actually fits in beautiful. It's a little bit sticky outy, so I may take a little bit off the base side. And for that, I may use a smaller blocks so I can see what I'm doing. So a little bit off the base side, and I'm just going to concentrate first of all on just taking material away, pardon me, and then I'm going to look at rounding it off. Right, There's the removed material on the bass side. Bass side, squeeze it in. That's a lovely fit. I mean, it's a lovely all over fit. So that's a tiny bit more on the, let's take a wee tiny fraction now off the treble side. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do just now is on the bass side, I'm just going to round this off a tiny bit from where it was, because I've taken some away. It will look smoother. There, bass side, treble side. Let's have another look. So I'm getting it all lined up size-wise, and then I'm just trying to feel the fit. That's perfect on that side. What I could do to see what I'm doing is just get a quick replacement. So can you see all right? Oh, it's not very good, sorry. I'm just going to do this up. Nice. And then I'm just going to use it to assess which side needs a hair's breadth more. Taking off it. It's almost perfect playing action. A tiny bit of, possibly a tiny bit of work with the slotting files. That's nice, nice, nice. Everything's down there tidy and lovely. There you go. So this is making a custom nut. So we've got a perfect fit down in there. It's hanging over a 1/3 of a millimetre there. It's flush there. I could do with a tiny bit of checking for glue in the slot there. So tiny bit off the treble end. A whisper. So hang in there. Oh, and while I'm at it, let's just see what we've got as the first fret action and see how far we are off. Okay, we're about, I would say we're about 0.2 of a mil too tall, maybe even 0.3, and in which case we could take that down further off. So let's do it both ends just to be sure. 0.3. So 0.3, sorry, 0.6, just over 0.6 on the treble side. Lower on the bass side. So I think, so what do we say, 0.6 and, I'd say it's 0.5. 0.6 and 0.5. So, yeah, 0.6 and 0.5. So that means I can take 0.2 off here. Bear with me. It's annoying, I know. So, tiny bit of stuff on the end, and what did we say? It was 0.5, 0.6 on the treble end, 0.5 on the bass end. So we can take a little bit more off the treble end. No, yes. yes, a bit more off the treble end, but we could take 3.2 off both of them. 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. So we have a reading of 390 here, 392, 392, and that would go to 372. 0.2 of a mil, yes, 372. So I think for this I would prefer to get back the tall board. I'm looking to take 0.2 off 3.9. Did we say 3.9? 0.2 off 3.9. Yeah, 0.2 off 3.9. So we want a bit heavier on the bass side. Is that right? No, a bit heavier on the treble side. Remember? Yes. What did we say? 3.9, 3.7, 3.7, square, it's good. 3.7, 3.7, 3.7, very nice, square, nice. Right, let's see where we get now. This is a very risky bit because if you go a fraction past the intended distance, then you are going to pay for it. So I'm just going to take the smallest amount off the end there and just smooth it off there. Okay, here we go, back on there. Oh, there was one little bit down here that I wanted to check. It seemed like something a little bit of grunge was in the way. Okay, final, long way around. Now if I've over snaffled this, then I can always use a tiny piece of copper sheet, copper foil as a, a 0.2 shim. No, it's not 0.2, it's about 0.005, but not bad. Oh, so hold fire. So I think I'm pretty close, by the way. So let's just get these things out of the way for a minute. Go backwards. But while this is there, I'll do my markup. So I'm ready to do my fret leveling in a minute. So I'm resting my arm on this because it helps to keep the pen straight. You can, if you're nervous about marking up like this, you could mask off your neck before you do the marking, and that will protect your fingerboard. Because it's a poly fingerboard, if I were to miss and get some of this on there, you don't need to panic because you can use thinners to remove it. If it was a nitro, you wouldn't use thinners, you would use cellular, you would use naphtha. And of course if it rosewood, it wouldn't be such an issue. But so now what I'm going to do, having done the nut, and by default it has sloping slots, whereas the original one doesn't. Well, they were sloping, but they had to be cut sloping in a square topped nut. This one has by default a sort of nut that's the top is bending back. Where's my last string? Now if these need any final adjustments in terms of the first fret action, which has to be perfect, as you know, then I can do it with the nut files. But you know, if I get it exactly right to begin with, I don't need that. That's great. Lovely. Right, so we are now ready. Oh, I worry about, actually those are really, they're not bad. Actually, the treble side is a tiny bit too high, so let's take care of those. Before we go any further, we'll just make sure everything's right. Once it's this close, it becomes a dangerous sort of gamble to start looking to try and take off more from the base, because it's just too easy to undo the height on this side now. So we've got it close on one side, so it's better at this point as a risk management strategy, much better to say, look, we're going to take this off the we're going to do the tweak the difference with the files. And that's almost spot on, actually. So it's only on the B and the E it looks a little higher. Yeah, there we go. So we get our 13. I cleaned these slots before this setup with a file, with a wire brush. I'm sorry. Close. Yeah, cleaned them with a wire brush so that we get a better, more dependable cut out of it, hopefully. Those Hosco files are very good, but they are hard, quite hard to master. Sometimes they either overcut or don't cut at all, and you can get caught in a bad situation. So I'm on the thinnest of thinnests now. Just a matter of patience, getting it down to the right action, which is not far off. I'm tempted to overdo it, and you have to be patient and disciplined. See, sometimes it doesn't appear to make any difference at all, but if you change the angle and you lean back a bit, you then take more off the front edge. But I try to keep the angle tilting back all the time, because that's what I most want for it to be, angled back. Otherwise you get a dead note. That's almost perfect. So now I'm just going to double check. Remember, the nut at this point isn't stuck in, so I'm kind of working with. Actually, that's great. That's probably on the mark, right as it is. Yep. Woohoo. On the mark. Don't touch it. Yep, same there. On the mark. That's perfect. All the way across. Absolutely perfect, mate. That's the best one I've done in a long time. I've had some struggles in the last few setups, I can promise you. So I've got my first fret action where I want it. I checked it beforehand, so I know it's the height I want. I've got my new nut in place and sized up and fitted. I think we're just about spot on, actually. Now what remains to do is the fret leveling, and here it is. Let's see if I can give you a way of seeing it in reasonable detail. I'm only worried about the frets here, so stare at them. Right. So this is a fresh piece of, a pretty fresh piece, a very nearly fresh piece of 400 grit paper on my fret leveling beam, or the legendary banana as I call it. Oh, let me just double check the relief. It's pretty flat. But I'm going to leave it as it is and only adjust it if I have any issues with it. It's more than none, which is my start point, as I always recommend. Let's see, what can we see? Okay, good. I'm just going to blow my nose a second. Pardon me. Excuse me in front. Right. So, being pretty flat, this neck is probably going to be, I don't know, that's about calibrated by luck. Okay, let us go. What's nice is that when you don't have to go too far with the nut files, you don't widen the slots much, which you do with those Hosco files because they're V-shaped in a sense. They have a notch profile, which is fine because it opens up the space above your string seat, or where the string sits, if you like. So having a notch is pretty good because it gives you clearance and prevents the string from binding on it. This is a very good set of frets, I'm pleased to announce. Wow, that's rare. You can tend to see after a while where the high ones are. There's a high spot there, low spot there, and low there, but it's minuscule compared to even the one I did yesterday, which was Andrew's Indonesian custom-made thing. It had quite some highs and lows. I mean, it's not unusual anyway. Not unusual, and it's easily fixable, so it's quite expected anyway to have a series of ups and downs. It's not like it's a duff neck, but this one I can say straight away it feels pretty good, which is nice. But then it's a decent quality Indonesian Telecaster, so Squire Telecaster I should say. So I'm going to be switching from 10s, which these I think are, down to 9s afterwards, but as I'm using these as the sacrificial strings, it doesn't make any sense to waste a whole set of 9s. Again, slightly, the dust tells me slightly high here, pretty much okay everywhere else, and there's a little bit of fret wear which I'm not clearing up altogether while I'm doing this. I'm just keeping an eye on it so that if by luck we clear some of it up, that's great, but it's not my target intention. So we get a little bit of zinging when bending now in the G track, and the G track is where, when you have a very low action and you have any very slight fret unevenness, the G track is where your chokes or zings, your struggles on bends will make themselves known. And this is such a generally good fretboard. It's not choking on any bends, it's just starting to protest. But that's fine. So now as I'm leveling the G track, as I call it, what I'm thinking about is wanting to hear that zing that I was getting on bending those high E notes across into the B track, as I call it. I want to be doing my best now to alleviate that little bit of zing that we were hearing. So that's what I'm aiming for. So it might be that I'm working a little heavier on the G track, and it's only really because it's more critical to that bending. So we've got a low spot here, we've got regular kind of here, so we've got a bit high here still, which is consistent all the way across the radius, which is fine, not unexpected. So now if I've helped it in any way, yep, see that? Oh, tiny bit there. So we've got a low spot here, which we know we have. You can see it. So bending in there is causing these to choke a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into that. Choke is too extreme a word. It's just that zing we're hearing. So I'm going back into here, and I'm going to sort of continue leveling, but I'm putting any downward pressure now on this part here. So I'm kind of lifting a bit of the weight on this end, and I'm focusing mainly on the leveling at this end, because I want to just eke out or bottom out any low spots so that they're all working together. And it's always the low frets on a setup that are the ones that dictate what's possible. They're the ones that cause the problems more than a single high fret. So now I'm going to do it one more time, and I'm going to concentrate on the area around the G. Whoops. Area around the G, and then I'm going to stop because it's pretty good. Was that area around the G? That's the 12th fret around this area in the middle here, because we've got a high spot here and a relatively lower spot here, and then it sort of goes back to normal, but feels a little higher. So I'm just going to do the same thing I was doing before with a tiny bit of pressure around the 12th fret, and that's just to bottom out any low frets that were causing that zing. But for what it is in terms of its action, I think it's pretty good. Where are we doing? That's now on. So that's 15. E on 15. Let's do a tiny bit more, concentrate on 15, and that's it then. I promise that will be it. Tiny bit on 15. 15 only. 15, there is 15, right underneath the tool. 15. There we are. That's all I'm doing. That's your lot. Now, the action I set, just double check it hasn't changed. It was pretty low to begin with. Yeah, we're barely just over 1.2. I'm going to stop there. That's pretty good, and it's hurting my fingers. Now we're going to do the D track. And the D track tends to be first of all it's the first of the wound strings, and the wound strings move more as they're struck than the plain strings do. So that means that as soon as we're into the wound strings, they need a little bit more space, so that we could get away with any slight fret unevennesses in the higher strings pound for pound, because they don't spin so much, so any sort of high peaks of single frets or little groups of frets wouldn't get in the way. But with the wound strings, they start to spin more, and obviously more as you get down to the low E, spins the most. And so we just want to make sure that there's enough clearance, and you can achieve that clearance obviously by raising the last fret action. That's nice. There's no slap at all in there. Yeah, you can sort out any fret slap by raising the last fret action, because it creates the space you need again. But obviously we're trying to get the low action without the buzzing, so sometimes you have to compromise, and it's not a defeat to compromise, because you're dealing with a composite of these different variables. One obviously being how hard somebody strikes the strings, which will dictate how much they move, over which you have no control. And it may be that after all your good work leveling the frets, lowering the action and making everything as precise and playable as it can be, it may be that somebody's playing action just isn't going to work with, playing style and the way they strike the strings isn't just not going to work with a ultra low action. And it's nobody's fault, it's just physics. You can't, if there isn't space for the strings to spin as much as they need to spin, then there's nothing you can do about it short of either making that space, and that isn't really going to be done by just endlessly leveling the frets. That helps to, flatten them out, even them out, but it's the only real option you've got is to hit it less hard, or raise the action, or increase the relief. Okay, that's good. Final one now. We're going to recalibrate for the low E, and so once this is done, that's the sort of precision bit really in some ways between getting the nut right, which takes a bit of experience. It's funny because you can go on forums, and people say, "Oh, I want to, what can I do to improve my whatever Harley Benton or whatever I've got?" And people will say, "Oh yeah, chuck a tusk nut on it," and they go, "Well, what nut?" And they go, "Oh, just get a Strat style nut. You'll find one." And so it's not quite that simple as we showed today, because you go and buy the Strat style nut that should fit a 9.5-inch radius style guitar. Of course, this might not be 9.5 inch. That could be the big thing anyway that I haven't noticed. Somebody's going to say, "You idiot! The Thinline, everyone knows because it's got the two wide range Fender humbuckers. It's got a 12-inch radius." Well, it could well have. Now that makes a bad noise because there's a bent string there. It's been hit against there. So ignore that one. That's fine by me. So we're good and done. So the sacrificial strings can come off. Yes. Anyway, so people just say, "Oh, change the nut," and then somebody says, "Well, how do I do that?" That's just. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to glue this nut in. It's perfectly fitted. I'm going to leave it in its fitting exactly as it is. There's no point adding glue to it if it doesn't need it. It's, not often that we get it so snugly fitting that we can get away with that, but I'm just going to do a second. But I'm going to leave it like that. So while I'm here, I'm just going to replace the string tree. Tusk string trees. Sometimes I have one of the pair, which I will have in a minute now, left over. But in this case I don't, so we shall be starting with one to go on here. So we've got the original one here, which is a pretty, well, there's nothing wrong with them. They've been on Fender guitars since forever, but for my liking they're a bit on the scratchy side. And I always think if you're going to concentrate on things like having a tusk nut, you might as well end up with a tusk string tree as well. Now, some guitars where I know where they're horribly cheap things, and some guitars I just basically throw these away. But on this guitar, on this one, I'm going to keep it because it's not a bad looking thing, and some people may just want to return this to, what do you call it, stock at some point. I'm not saying any sane person would want to do that, but sometimes you never know. Right, we have Strat Teles over there, stuff in the bin over here. Now for this I'm going to slightly enlarge the hole because the tusk nut is very slightly, sorry, the tusk screw is very slightly wider. So all I'm going to do is carefully widen, very slightly widen the top, and I used 2.5 mil. Ow! 2.5 mil bit there, and then I'm just going to add this little fella to there. Don't really need to do that with that on there. I don't know why I left those strings on there at all. I do leave them strings on there if I don't have a hole already, because I sort of line them up with the strings, but that isn't the case here. So really all I need to do is just find and locate that. And there we have it. I'll say these ones are going to be reused for the next setup in my appropriately labelled box. Now these strings, although they're filthy, I might keep them for sacrificial purposes. Likewise, I might keep this old nut as well, because it's not so much that to reuse it, but I might use it as scrap for shimming something in the future. Never hurts to have extra bits of material around. Okay. So what I'll probably do next, before, okay. So this is the time-consuming, annoying bit, as if all of my setups weren't annoying. What I'm going to do is, in order to reuse these strings, I really need to carefully straighten them out, basically, the strings, so that we can get them through the bridge and stuff without tangling, and then stand some chance of reusing them in another guitar somewhere. So anyway, it's been a good couple of weeks, having lots of good, interesting work to do. Some of you on my Facebook page would have seen classic, guitar kit builder setup mistake, and that was on Andrew's custom built mango wood and teak left-handed Firebird that a builder made the body for him in Indonesia and sent it for me to put hardware on it and do all the electrics and set it up. And one of the things I sort of kicked myself now, and at the time I think the maker asked Andrew, did he want the no, what was this conversation? Because Andrew was going to fit, right, the maker would normally have put in bridge posts for stop bar and pickups on a build, but because Andrew was going to use, I was going to fit a Bigsby for him, Andrew was talking to him about leaving the stop bar ones off, and then it got into a conversation about, well, should I leave off the bridge ones as well? And I can't remember how we arrived at it, but in the end it was arrived at that he would not do the stop bar bridge post holes or the bridge post holes. And the problem with that, see, you always get a broken bit there, and in some ways I think if that was probably was my idea, because not having when people use a template often to do those things, they will, it's possible, I don't know the builder's process exactly, but it's possible, sometimes even likely, that people who doing a set neck will do it's likely they'll do all the pickup routes first, because it's difficult when you've glued in your neck. It's hard to get your router a clean access to the space by the neck to do the pickup holes. Anyway, so sometimes the reason I think I probably said this to not do the bridge post holes straight away is that because I was sort of keen to be able to make sure that the neck center line was all good and proper before I position the bridge, because it's so sensitive that if somebody uses a template to route the things on a center line that they are pretty certain is right, and then they glue in the neck and then they then they send it to me, or then they put a bridge on. What they may often find is that between routing on the disembodied body, routing the pickup routes and the bridge posts on the disembodied guitar body, between then and fitting the neck center line, which is the important one, and that's where the strings have to follow. If they don't, it looks terrible, and sometimes strings slip off the edge and so forth. But when you do route the or locate the bridge pickup, the bridge post and the pickup routes, you locate them using a template on the center line of the body. Sometimes you can find by the time you've put the neck on that it's out of kilter with the neck center line, and so that you go ahead and put the neck on, send it to me, and I get to position, put the bridge on, and find that the strings are running too close to the edge here, and because it's a set neck, there's nothing I can do about it. So I probably agreed or advised to leave the posts off, because there's a bit of wiggle room in terms of where the pickups sit. There's a bit more wiggle room than there is in terms of string placement room. Anyway, long-winded thing, but there was a reason for it. But interestingly, had I not done that, he would have had to have drilled the bridge post hole, and he would have realized at that point that it went through straight into the tunnel that he had routed already in the lower part, the body part of the guitar, for the wiring to go through. So because he didn't put that on, he didn't find that out, and of course I went and marked up and drilled the hole. I went and discovered that the place where the bridge had to go, the post had to go, coincided unhelpfully with his wiring channel, and I cut through all of my wiring, which was not my most happiest moment. Anyway, not as a result of that, but not helped by that that kind of thing, I screwed up, was I forgot that I was working on a left-handed guitar. Can you believe? And because I'd bought two things. My mitigation was that I'd been doing a number of guitars for Andrew recently, and they're normally all left-handed, but in fact I'd been doing a number of right-handed guitars for him recently. So I was thinking right-handed, and I also got this new roller bridge, which was also pre-intonated or pre-compensated right-handed. So with this thing in my hand, and with having finished a right-handed guitar for Andrew the day before and gone home and test played it, I was sort of, my frequencies were attuned to right-handed. So like an absolute Burke, I having spent ages recovering from drilling into the maker's ill-placed wiring tunnels, I ended up marking up the bridge as if it was having a slight right-handed tilt. And then I went and drilled perfectly and all the rest of it, and put it on and thought, something isn't right about this. What the hell's going on? And then I hung it up on the wall and thought, oh, you absolute plonker of the highest order. I'd gone and tilted it the wrong way, and so of course it would never intonate, because obviously. Anyway, so the only thing I could possibly do was to fill and re-drill, which of course I was aghast at the thought of doing that, because it's a blemish. There were a few mistakes that the builder had made, but none of them were visual blemishes. The wiring thing just cost me a load of time, but I had gone and done something which would then end up leaving a very small but noticeable, if you looked up close, noticeable repair. Most of it would be covered obviously by the new hole and so on, but a little crescent of the repair would show. So I thought, what do I do? My thinking went from, do I just throw it in the bin, apologise, go and spend £900 odd and order another one from the same manufacturer? which I just couldn't afford to do. We'd be bankrupt and starving if I had to do that. But in some ways, I would have preferred to do that. And then after having kind of freaked out for a bit, I had to get my head into kind of more sensible, come on Sam, you've got to put this right somehow, mode. And then I thought, okay, look, you're going to fix it the way you'd fix it if it was yours, and you're going to minimize as much as you can the any whatever visual negatives. So the thing that occurred to me would be I needed some teak of the stuff that was on the top of the guitar, and so there was no way of getting hold of any, especially because this was some guy in a village in Indonesia. I wasn't going to find that exact same wood, mango wood. No, it's teak. Sorry, it was jungle teak or whatever. So I thought, where am I going to get some from? And then it occurred to me that on this left-handed thing, there was a scratch plate here, which he'd made out of mango wood, which is absolutely gorgeous piece of wood for a scratch plate. But because of the way it sits and covers a hole, you're never going to have a situation where you take that scratch plate off and run it without. It's because you would end up with this great big hole, and the switch basically the switch has to sit over it on a scratch plate. You could have a round plastic thing with some screws there and show all the wood here, but I thought nobody's ever going to change the look of it that much. So my decision was to borrow some teak, Indonesian teak, from under there. So I got a plug cutter, and I went and cut me about a 6mm deep plug of teak from under there, as close as I could to match any grains, which is not actually that easy, but wasn't. So I got some grain lines in it which could match up. I mean, don't forget, when it's done, the little crescent that you can see is so tiny. Really, the issue of whether it's got any matching grains in it is academic. But anyway, so I cut out this little plug, and then from there I went and attached it, glued it, clamped it overnight to a dowel of oak. So it was going to be the top section which I was going to tap in, and then I had to kind of carefully shape it to stand a chance of fitting it in the hole, because the problem is the hole for the posts are made at this bizarre size, which are never quite the right size for any drill bit you've got. So that's okay. So the hole in the body always has to be slightly worked with a Dremel to widen it up, because otherwise you have to hit it too hard and you split wood and stuff if you try and just bash it in. And then the thing, if you're going to fill it, consequently if you're going to drill out one and fill it and then re-drill to redo something, you really don't have much. It's even that's not accurate, so you have to handcraft the plug basically to get it snug to fit in, which is never a precision milled thing. It ends up looking like a handcrafted thing, but that's the best you can do. So within those constraints, I managed to craft this piece, put it in, lightly glue. And the problem you've also got is if you're pushing a plug, and I basically kept it shorter than the whole hole because we didn't need to go all the way to the bottom, and I didn't want to run the risk of getting it wedged part the way down and it breaking or whatever. So the challenge is, if you're pushing let's say a plug of that sort of thickness, see the hole in there, that's how I thin them down. Normally I would attach that to a Dremel, but even that's difficult, and then I would run it against sandpaper until it was exactly where I wanted. But the difficulty in getting a plug into a hole is, it's not a good example here, but let's say it's going in that way into the hole. You put some glue in there, and if it fits really nicely, you've basically got an airtight fit, nearly. And even if it's not airtight, it still fits tight enough so it doesn't allow any hardly any or much air from underneath the plug to come out, and it doesn't allow any glue to come out. So it starts to spring, or it gets to a place where it just will not go any further, and it's under pressure. And you know, what do you do? And in some situations where I've not had to, where seeing the hole isn't a problem, I've drilled a hole through the plug itself to allow the excess glue to come out the top, which has worked. But in this case, it's not feasible because you know, the whole point is to have this little piece of wood as a sort of as flawless a repair as possible. So I got it in to about 2 millimeters short of, you know, above the flush of the surface, and I thought, do you know what, that's as good as I'm going to get. So I had to then scrape that back with brand new blades and so on and so forth. Anyway, having gone through all of that and done my repair, the you know, the thing I guess anybody thinks about is, oh, this is terrible. How do I account for this? Do I just tell the customer and not put anything about it on my Facebook page? And you know, do I keep it secret and out of shame? And I just thought, no, you know, one of the things that's always worked for me, and I've been proud of doing it that way, is to just be totally honest. And if I make a mistake, then I've made a mistake, and you know, to live with it and own up to it. And I think, you know, it's really important for me to do that. So I kind of have there we are. Are we still running? Yeah, we're running. What are we in now? We're in about 1 hour 26. Yeah, so I just have to be like that, because it's just, to me, it's just more important to tell the truth about it. So, you know, and on the basis, like I said, that I've always been about being 100% honest and true to who I am. And the thought of, you know, the only reason I would lie about it would be because I was ashamed of making a mistake. And that's hard enough to deal with anyway. You know, I think, you know, many people are, many of us, our default reaction is to punish ourselves for making mistakes. You know, sometimes we have, I don't know about you, but I have very harsh, or can have very harsh expectations of myself. And so that if I screw up, I can be very punishing of myself. And I've had to learn, and still learning, to be less so. And setting myself up to not make mistakes and to hide mistakes seems to me, you know, playing far too much into that increasing the shame of having made a mistake. You know, it's trying to be perfect, pretending to be perfect, pretending to be someone I'm not, you know, who doesn't screw up once in a while. So I just had to, you know, put it out there, and took all the pictures of it, and you know, and it, even at an intellectual level, it fits with, you know, my beliefs that making mistakes is, of course, how we learn stuff. Most people learn stuff, and if, you know, if some people are lucky that they learn only from reading and finding out, so they don't make mistakes, well, good for them. But I think a lesson learned in experience by making a mistake is far more valuable. That's my personal take on it, than a lesson learned out of a book. Some would say, well, if both bits of learning prevent you from making a screw up, why make a distinction? Don't know really, but I think it's more about, for me, I would hate to be the kind of person who my first instinct would be to cover up and pretend I hadn't made the mistake, and because that would mean I would start lying to customers and giving them back guitars with mistakes that I hoped they wouldn't find, and so on and so forth. And that's just not how I've ever wanted to be. Okay, so now we have the recrowning done, and now it's time to polish out, which is a boring, long-winded process, as you probably know, involving lots of sandpapers and some micro mesh pads, but it has to be done. So I'm just going to carry on with this in the same mode. So I can see some little dings of cowboy cord wear, but that's fine. We know that we'll find that, and it's the way I look at it is, well, I'm leveling. I level for playability, not for aesthetics. So if leveling for playability happens to fix the cowboy cord grooves down at that end, then I'm fine with that, and we get a bonus. But unless a customer specifically says, I want you to remove those grooves because I hate the sight of them, and I understand that it will cost fret metal to do so, and I'm willing to exchange fret metal, i.e. fret life, for that cosmetic improvement, then I'll do them. But otherwise I don't aim to do it. I just basically try and clear up as much as I can within the leveling that I am doing, with a focus on playability, fret levelness. Anyway, so that's, where are you, microphone? So that's why we still have a couple of dimples left. Anyway, yeah. So that thing about you know, owning up to mistakes. It's even when you believe in it and have a conscious focus on it, it's hard. It can be quite hard to do, you know, because there is a pull, or a sort of historical. Most of us probably have a tendency to feel ashamed and bad about it, and so on. So you have to work hard at forgiving yourself for making a mistake, and then bear in mind that most of the time, it's always been the case that most of the time my customers are more forgiving of me than I am of me. So, you know, quite often it's the case that what I'm cursing myself at, if I've made a mistake, is a way, treating myself in a way that they wouldn't even treat me and wouldn't want to see me treated, which is a funny thing when you realise that and understand that it's you doing it to you. So anyway, so yeah, so I just posted the pictures and talked all the way through it, and you know, did my kind of usual thing of showing how it happened and something of the thought process that goes along with it, and then on top of that, how I go about rectifying it to my best of my abilities. And I do get that when that happens, a number of people tend to comment and thank me for sharing it, and I think a lot of people genuinely value having somebody who doesn't hide mistakes and shares how they happened and what they do to put them right. Yeah, you know, the obvious thing comes out of that too is that, you know, people have, I think, and it seems that people have more trust when they don't think that your first instinct is to cover something up and, you know, pretend it either didn't happen or blame them for it, which is not uncommon in any sort of repair environment or, you know, improvement type workshop-y environment. It's more common than I would have ever thought possible. Anyway, so by the time I get to this part on a setup of a guitar like this, I'm usually sort of happy that I'm at the end of what I call the precision part of it. So I know I've leveled the frets to a point where I've got the best possible playing action out of the lowest playability at both ends. I've lowered the action for the customer. I've made it play the best it can. We've got a flat neck, so it's going to feel low everywhere. you know, replaced the nut for a new Tusk one, and you know, dealt with the challenge that that came up with. My brain was telling me it was too wide a slot. It's not common, but it's more common than you'd think. So that in the rare occasions, the rare event that I get a nut that drops almost straight in with the merest whiff of sanding or adjustment, that's like something to cheer about. It's incredibly rare. I'm constantly reworking Tusk nuts. I suppose the reason is that, you know, even on a production run of one particular type of guitar, it probably is the case that the slots aren't even perfectly even throughout the whole of that range, you know. But that's definitely quite a bit wider, and noticeably so, that you would get a loose fit, and it's horrible when you have a loose fit in the nut department. It's the worst thing. The nut, even if it tightens up under load, the nut leans forward, and you know, you just don't feel, even if you stick it down, it just doesn't feel right or look right. So, and actually the point I'm making is that the difference between it leaning and feeling loose and not leaving you feeling confident in it, can be as much as, you know, a 1/20th of a millimeter different. I mean, basically, as soon as it is in any way loose, in other words, not snug, and that's very likely you're going to encounter that, because it's rare that you're going to get anything out of the packet that is as snug as this is. So it takes working it, and of course if the size you need is bigger than the replacement, if the size you need is fractionally narrower than the replacement, that's fine, because that's why we sand it a little bit on the block and then fit it and all's good. But when it's the opposite way around, when you need more nut than you've got in your hands, baby, then you've got no choice but to either find a bigger one as a start point or go and make one from a blank. But you saw how I converted a nut, and it would happen to have a spare one or I bought for a guitar that I didn't use it on in the end. So that became something I could use to convert into, and the reason I could use it, of course, is it had the same basic E to E string, and that's the first priority variable that I work with. If I hadn't found one with the same E to E, I could still have used a larger nut to cut down, but I would have to be facing marking up and creating a brand new set of slots, and that is a surprisingly challenging little activity. It isn't easy as you think either. As many people who make their first guitars end up demonstrating when they show them off, and you'd be amazed how sensitive the eye is to varying spacings between strings. If you're a guitarist, you know immediately that, and again, the actual amount of difference between one string spacing and the other can be in the order of 1/100th of a millimeter, but your eye just knows it's not right. So anyway, yeah, so it's very difficult to do, and there are, you know, lots of methods that people give, you know, how to be exact. There's one that uses, I saw the other day, very well presented. It uses a square, an engineer's square, to draw the lines across and get the spacings right. So it's a very, you know, if you use a string spacing guide ruler, you know, you're still drawing a line or marking a scratch next to what you think is the middle of the mark on the ruler, and you know, there's all room, scope for errors to creep in, which course you don't get in the factory CAD, CAD, well whatever, you know, CNC, BBC methods. Okay, so having sanded out nearly the polished, recrowned, levelled, recrowned and polished out the frets, now we're going to take off all this masking tape, clean off everything, give everything a clean up with the naphtha, rub down, because it's pretty clean generally, and then we will be ready to restring and to stretch out new strings and that will be done. So while the stuff is on there, I've just got rid of most of the dust that I can. Let's zoom you out for a better view. I said zoom out, sunshine. There we go. So on any maple fingerboard guitar, any kind of tape needs to be watched out for when removing. If you have a vintage guitar, even, you know, and the tape runs across the body, even that can be risky. You know, you can find a chunk of finish that's been waiting to come off for years. We'll choose that moment to come off. And you know, it's one of the things I sometimes have to say to people is, you know, whenever there's fret work done and we have to use some masking tape or something like that to mask off the fretboard to allow us to polish out the frets this way, you know, there's a small chance that something that's already cracked or something that's old and lost its grip will choose to come off. And in the Fender US and Mexico made guitars, they're usually polyurethane finish, and that sometimes because of the fretting approach, sometimes it comes off during fretting. Sometimes it's just got low adhesion, the whole lot hasn't stuck to the wood very well, and that's quite common in some of those American and Mexican production lines. Don't ask me why. Something in maybe it was only a period of time it happened, maybe it was something in the batch they used, maybe it was something in the basic formulation of the finishes they used, I don't know, but it was more likely to come off. And so if I see an American or Mexican blonde Strat like this, you know, Tele or Strat like this, and I've got to work on it, I feel nervous. And I have to say to people, there is a small but meaningful chance that finish on this may choose to come away if I'm going to do fret work on it. And if that's the case, then we may be either faced with living with small amounts of missing finish, or if it comes off in substantial amounts, we may be looking at needing to refinish the fretboard. And the interesting thing is, there are a couple of ways that the poor man's way of doing that is to scrape off all the poly, because you know, if it was you know, nitro, you might be able to take it off with thinners, but if it's poly, you have to basically scrape it off by hand between the frets, and then it is possible to spray over again with a better material that presumably doesn't have the same adhesion problems, but it's still the method of spraying over the top that I really don't like as well. Although if it's about saving money and fixing a problem, then it may be we have to just live with that less than perfect method and do it the way that Fender thought was good enough in the first place. Alternatively, if the amount of finish that has been pulled off is substantial, then it may be that the best way to redo it is to take all the material, take the frets out, refret it. But you know, you can see that it's going from a small, relatively small setup job to could be a complete refinish of the neck, thanks to, or certainly of the fingerboard, thanks to Fender's decision along the way to either use a certain batch of materials or in the fretting process to do it a certain way that saved them money, which, you know, you can sort of forgive. They're trying to save money. I'm going to show you something on here that will, Mike, probably you'll be interested in. Remember I said how your string had bashed into the fingerboard or into the fret. You can see where it did. It's bashed in there and it's bashed there. So that's what caused the ding that was making it unplayable on the second fret. See, it's been pushed right in. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Okay, so look, we are cleaned up, zoomed out. I think, oh, there's one more thing to do. I need to, we're going to tighten up the default the jack socket. I can't really show you this, but I'm going to do this with a homemade device I've done, because the original type of socket is an absolute pain in the jack socket. Oh, and it's the wrong, is this the wrong size? How has this turned out? I've got the wrong size. This can't be. Wait a minute, what's going on? I need to get my, thank you. I need to get my sockets. Bear with me a minute, please, while I bring out the box of sockets. Now, the vintage style socket is loose, and it always comes loose because it's a crap system. But to tighten it up, I have to use a StewMac tool, which I have got, and I need a socket that fits on and that I can adjust. So this part holds, it reaches in and grabs the jack and holds it in one position, and this over the top grabs the socket, except it doesn't because it's too large. So somehow, but I've used it before, so somehow the socket I need is smaller. I don't know, the socket I need is smaller. It's a smaller jack screw thing. So now I'm going to have to try and figure out what it is. Here's a 13. Oh God, no, is that turning it around? I don't know. So it's 13, that's a 12, it's not a 12. Can I measure it so I get at least a chance of figuring it out? Is that the actual measure across the top? Oh, I can't get into there, can I? I would say this is an 11 mils, if that. 12. So we had 13 out there. Have I got it hanging up there somewhere else, just waiting to be used? No, it's not there, is it? Ah, could it be in my little, could it be in my wee little baggie? I don't know why it would be in here. This is my tailor tools. That says 11 mils, isn't it? What? Maybe it is that one. Maybe I had it out there because I knew it was important to keep it out separate. I can't see what this says. Oh, no, wait a minute, this is not that. That's a tailor. No, this isn't that. This ain't that. That one I've got in there is for hex key adjustment. So, alright, I'll have to find an 11 and try and see if this works. Okay, so yeah, so let's find something. 1/32. So this is a Eastern European, Far Eastern guitar. So we're sort of expecting it to be a metric, but we could be wrong. So let's just make sure it isn't a 10 first of all. That's no 10. So if it's got to be an 11, we've now got to find an 11. And this is clearly a pain in the arse to get my hands in. So that ain't it. It's not a 12, is it? No, that's not moving at all. So it's not a 12. So it's got to be an 11. Anybody? So the problem I've got is if it's not only got to be the right size, but it's got to fit this block in there to allow it to turn. So if that doesn't happen, unless it starts off this size, I ain't going to be able to use it. Oh, maybe this is it. Oh, 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 oh. 19, 3/18 and 9, 12. 12 and 13. Right, let's keep those together. Let's put this out of the way. I think I may have found the solution. Sorry, it's so noisy. It's so noisy. Where have you gone to? Is this you? Where's the other one? No, it's only one. Okay. Right, sorry about that terrible noise. That was very careless of me. So, the idea is, the reason it's difficult is because we have to have this shaped bit in the middle to allow this thing to lock in place. So now, if I go in here now and I gently turn the, that's it, turn the locking thing, and now I can turn this baby round like so. I was trying to jump over, bear with me. That's actually, damn it, damnations. So this, I think, let me just, oh, come on please. So I think this needs a slight grinding. The problem is, it hasn't got this little smooth lip on here is not helping. So, just out of interest, let's see if I can make the world a little easier place for myself. If I can grind this, because it can only be used for this tool, for this purpose. If I were to grind this little thingy down a bit, on a flat spot, then, it'll probably make a noise, sorry, then I should be able to get a little bit closer and lock it better. Okay. Woohoo! I think that gives a little bit of grinding, gives me a better purchase on this slightly not very easy to grip, low rise nut. I think I know what I mean. If I press down, turn, baby. Oh yeah. I think that's pretty good. All right. Ooh, so we've got 11. We've got the 11 on here now, which is the last one that worked. I shall put the other two over there, where they may be the right size for another time. And I will remove this. Thank you, Paul. Twice in 2 days. Wow. And I hadn't used it for about 6 months beforehand. Twice in 2 days, it's come in handy. Now, I'm going to go and wash my hands before I go anywhere near getting strings out for this guitar, because that's really what we're left to do. So bear with me. I'm not going to switch off because we're near the end now. And in the end, here we are in the pristine, clean bathroom of Relove Guitars. On the wall we have sterling OSB, chip marine ply or whatever it is, made from crushed up chipboard things. A nice thick layer of industrial grey dust everywhere, and a hand wash basin that looks like it comes from the best of the 70s, which is actually where this office felt like it had lived. It felt like it had emerged straight from the 70s when I moved in here. 3 years ago. I have cleaned the bathroom a couple of times, at least. I mean, top to bottom, but it still returns and gets covered in grime because there's dust everywhere. Now, tomorrow is a spray day. So my plans are, and I have to look at these before I go tonight. So the plans are to spray a Trekkie whole body, Trekkie number 11, and I'm going to chuck some tinted finish on there as well as some clear satin, and I'm going to do Adam's headstock for his Sally guitar, and I'm going to do, oh yes, tomorrow I'm going to do Mike's Pacifica, which is going to get a very light, some people might think it's a bit naughty to put Morris on. Mike said he'd like to lose the Pacifica name because it's a keeper for him, and he doesn't want Pacifica written on it. So I said, well, would you like a Morris on there? And he was very happy to do that. So if anyone ever sees that guitar, and I doubt they will because I'm sure Mike will be enjoying playing it for years, but it will be modified and it'll have a different bridge from standard. So it'll look different pickups, different tuners, so it will have had a lot of differences to it, but that's why it's allowed to have a Morris badge. But it's not because I think it's my right to cover up or scrape off a manufacturer's badge. It's only if and because the customer fancied that being done that way. Right, here we go. Right, so we have the best of the best tuners, which we know as the split post Fender style tuners. These are really, really good, sensible, reliable tuners. You can't go wrong. Some people don't like them, but they're brilliant. I go 2 tuners past the one I'm doing and cut. Get it. Make sure you're holding the right string and you're lining up on the right post, otherwise you will end up with too short a string and it will cost you a packet of strings. There we go. So just talk through what I do. Stretch it up to the next one, which is that one. I go 2 tuners past there, 2 posts, and then when I get to the end, of course I'll have to imagine how much that is. Then I go straight down the hole, it stops, and then I come forward and bend it round the post first of all, and then start winding, holding it down, keeping it all taut with my hand, and then it is in place. So these are 9s going on now, and the 9s may they will pull less on the neck, so the neck may be slightly flatter than I want, and we may need to make a truss rod adjustment in a minute. I've also got to check and tighten the bottom end strap button as well. So this is a very nice, the 6 inline split posts are really nice to do because you don't have to switch direction on the power winder. You just grab them string after string. You don't have to change hands or anything, which you do with a 3 aside. And here we go. It looks like to me like my saddles have gone wandering off during the time we've been doing the setup, so I will double check the playing height of all those strings down there at the last fret once this is done. So the remains to do now is to get the strings on, followed by stretching them to remove all the slack. And as I say on every setups, I cannot overemphasize the importance of this stretching process. 50% of tuning instability is down to unreleased slack in your strings. The other 50% of tuning instability when you play or when you're having to keep tuning in between sessions is the other 50% is down to the nut, what it's made of, and how clear and friction-free the slots are. So your nut, which we've changed out for a Tusk one, which we've got to the correct height, we've got the exact correct height for the slots for the first fret and everything. So it's a good quality nut. The slots are friction free because they're tusk, and we've got the first fret action to the right height. Everything's good, and so that's half of our tuning stability equation done. The other half now is what we're going to do with, oops, sorry, you can't see me anymore for a minute, is what we're going to do with stretching the strings. Now once I've stretched all the strings, like I'm about to do, I'll start doing, then the next thing we have to do after that is to check the intonation and make sure that each string has its correct individual length, playing length, and we do that by adjusting the saddles. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it all up to pitch with a standard tuning. Or close. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to check my heights of the strings, and I'm going to do that with my little 1.5mm doofer. I'm going to start at the top here, and I want to go for, I'm going to sneeze, hallelujah. And that directed my sneeze straight onto the microphone. Oh, I do apologise. Let's get this. First one at 1.25, there we have it. Next one, a tiny bit higher, a mere fraction higher. Tiny bit more. Yeah. This is not easy to see. 1.5. 1.5. 1.5. Oops, a little bit. Yeah, that's about right. That's not far off, actually. Okay, so that's me action set. I just checked my neck relief. That's got a little bit. We'll keep it as is. Right, so stretching. Remember, 50% of your tuning stability is your nut. The other 50% is slack in the strings, and so what you do is you go up and down each string with the thumbs and forefingers with clean hands, which is why I washed my hands. Up and down each string and stretch between thumb and forefinger quite vigorously to get rid of all the slack and stretch it out. You might not think, you'll hear in a minute how much this bit of stretching detunes the strings, right? And that will give you an idea of how much stretch, if you like, or slack is in your strings. And if you add it up with all the times I do this repeatedly in the next few minutes, you'll get a sense of all the slack that is in there. And that slack can eke itself out over years of playing. Now the fat strings, wound strings, are going to hold more slack than the thin ones, but the point is, people think that a little bit of a when they put the strings on will be it, and it will then play and tune. It won't. And the problem is, if you do stretching correctly, your guitar, but you don't do the nut right, your guitar will still be going out of tune, and you'll think it's possibly the slack in the strings, or you'll blame the tremolo or whatever else you got to blame. So you've got to get both of these components right. You've got to get the nut right, start with a good quality nut, ideally tusk, with the slots friction free. See how little a change that required? I also notice how when I'm tuning up at this point, you know you've got a good nut now, because that tuning is direct and linear in its relationship to turning the peg. There's no tune, nothing happens, suddenly it goes forward. It's tuning exactly as I'm turning the peg. It feels direct and one-to-one in its ratio, or not one-to-one in its ratio, a gear ratio, but one-to-one in its relationship between turning it and the pitch going up. It's smooth, and of course the most important thing is you know it's good as well because there's no pings. If you're ever doing this and you're hearing pings, you've got to work on those slots before you carry on and try and play, because otherwise you'll still be going out of tune. And the difference with a guitar that plays and stays in tune to one that goes out of tune, that hasn't had the nut done and the stretch taken out, is night and day. That's pretty much there. The low E will hold a bit more than the A. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to check the intonation and set it if needs be. Yeah, this, until you've had a guitar that has a good nut, and had the slack all properly stretched out the strings, you will not know how wonderful. You will not have experienced how wonderful it is that you can have a guitar that plays and stays in tune, and that the feeling that it just goes into tune without fight is absolutely brilliant. Good. Mike, you've got the intonation spot on for nines. Very good. 3 and 3 as expected. So, just a last couple of little things. I'm going to look at this relief again with nines. That's practically flat, and that's inviting trouble, because the minute the weather changes in a month's time, that will flatten out and we will suddenly be in the land of buzzes. So there's no real need to set ourselves up for that when it isn't necessary. So I'm going to slack this off a little bit, if I can get the doofer in there. And then we'll just do a quick check. I want a tiny bit more relief. That is a tiny bit more. Is it a tiny bit more? Yeah, it is fractionally more, but I prefer that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just check the last thing. I'm sorry, the view has been really boring all day. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry. So we've got these funny things on here, these rubbery things. I don't know what they're really for, but I'm going to first of all try and tighten this thingy up here. And if it tightens, all is good. That's all it needed. Sometimes if it's worn out, it will require plugging the hole with some wood and glue and then re-drilling. But this case, it's just that it's come loose over the months or years that this guitar's been owned. Okay, look at that. Ladies and gents, and people of all kinds, here we are Born to be kings, we're the masters of the universe. Lovely. Ready to go. Ta-da! Beautiful. Yeah, I'll just send that away in the bag with it, and we're done. Thinline Tele. Well, this is showing up at 2 hours, 10 minutes, but there's a bit of time playing it beforehand and setting the action originally, and also preparing. I prepared all my papers and my these things beforehand, so that's about the right time I would expect. And also, it had pretty decent frets, so I'm happy with that. One last thing, people say to me, they say, I don't ever see you adjusting the height of the pickups, and my answer to that is that it is subjective and has one guiding principle, and the guiding principle is that the closer your pickup poles are, relatively speaking, there are some issues, but generally speaking, as a principle, the closer the string is to the pickup pole, then the greater the output will be, but the less the tonal dynamic. And in contrast, or by contrast, the further away the pickup magnets are from the strings, the quieter the pickup will sound, but the more the tonal dynamic, or the greater the tonal dynamics. And what that means to you is, by definition, therefore, a subjective thing. You have to figure out what sound you like best out of it. And so, you know, when you see a setup video when somebody says they get a little thing and they go 3mm, they're only doing that because they read somewhere that it should be 3mm. They're not doing that because they know that 3mm is the best possible sound, because it's subjective. It may be the best possible sound for them, but it may not be for you. You may like the tone that it makes when it's closer to the magnet than further away. So please take it with that sort of pinch of salty substances, and you know, it's the same with all things where numbers and guitars are concerned. None of them are explicit things. None of them are objective things. The numbers are all start points towards getting a setup. Certainly in guitar setup, they're all start points towards getting the setup that you like and that suits your playing and your instrument and your amp and the time of day you're doing it and the mood you're in and the color of your hair, etc. Right. So where I would cite numbers at all, it's only as a means to getting towards that target, or that target that I'm aiming for, which is a setup that I like the feel of and that seems to be popular with people who brought their guitars to me. And so when I talk about 1.5mm at the last fret, low E last fret, that's all I'm talking about. Is it's, you know, and somebody says, well, do you know what that equals at the 12th fret? And actually I could work it out, you know, with 2 minutes and a calculator. It's about, divided by about 1.4, and it's that at the 12th fret. But it's not scientific and it's not exact. So does it matter that I don't do it at the 12th fret? No. Am I saying that if you measure your action at the 12th fret, you're better or worse than me? Not at all. It just happens to be the way I prefer to do it, and you could do it. If you follow my way, you'll get to the same type of action that I get. And actually, once you're there, you don't really care that much what it actually is, because the only reason you care about it at all is because you want it to play a certain way. So that's it. Just don't get hung up. There are means to an end. That's what numbers are for in guitar setup. Grimy. Okay, so let's just put this away, and that's it, folks. We're done. I'll see you on Mike's next one, which is the Pacifico, which is going to get more of a bit of a treatment. See you then.